Hi, everybody. Welcome to Virtual Happy Hour. I'm Raina from Garden District Bookshop. I want to welcome everyone and thank you all for joining me this evening. Today, I am going to be talking with Cheryl Gerber, who I'm very excited about. She is a local documentary photographer, and her work has been in the New York Times and the Associated Press, and she has been working for Gambit Weekly as a staff photographer since '94, I think. I remember that correctly. She has 4 books. Her most recent book is Cherchez, Femme, which we will be talking a bit about today. It is a beautiful book, a beautiful cover. And I'm going to click the button here and welcome Cheryl into Virtual Happy Hour.
Hi, Raina. Thanks so much.
Thank you for joining me, for sure.
Any excuse to have a drink?
Oh, that's right.
I have a triple here.
What are you drinking this evening?
I'm drinking whiskey.
All right.
With a little bit of orange in it.
Just enough for the flavor.
Yeah.
This is rum and lemonade, which is also called What I Had in the Refrigerator.
Oh, I love the cat glass.
Amy got this for me for Christmas 2 years ago, I think. And it just was a coincidence that I used it for the first Virtual Happy Hour. And so many people mentioned it, like, oh, I love your kitty glass. I'm like, okay, well, that's it. That's the one. This is my Virtual Happy Hour glass now.
Perfect.
I want to say hi, everyone, again. And if you have any questions, any comments, anything, type them in the comment section below. We can see those. We will answer your questions. We'll talk about anything. And it's always fun to see where everyone is watching from. So if you want to type in where you are viewing from this evening, that's always a fun thing to see for all of us. And so, Cheryl, this book here is, first of all, it's hefty. I went and got this from the bookstore today just so that I could have it on camera. And it was like, it's bigger than you think.
It's huge.
But I love it. I love the cover. I love all the photos. And I want to show some of the photos to everyone in here. Some beautiful photos. You have to check it out. I'll put a link to it in the comments so you can see it on the website.
I love it.
But this is it your 4th book?
It's my second solo book. So, following New Orleans Life and Death in the Big Easy, which I did in 2015. But this by far is the biggest venture that I've had in book authoring. It took me a good couple of years of, looking for a publisher and photographing the women, compiling it, getting the essays put together. And it was a smash hit January 16th earlier this year when we did the opening at the New Orleans Jazz Museum. Unfortunately, Corona kind of put a halt to all the other book signings over the year, but I'm hoping we can gear up this fall and try to sell some as Christmas gifts. It's a beautiful book.
It is a beautiful book, and it is perfect for Christmas. So it's all about the women of New Orleans, right?
It is.
And I'm wondering, did you look at all of the photos you'd been taken and realize you had a bunch of pictures of all these amazing New Orleans women? Or do you think, what I need to do, take some pictures of New Orleans women? So which came first?
Well, what happened was, whenever you start doing a book, it ends up being something totally different. I was inspired to do the book for the Women's March back in 2017, when 5,000 plus women in New Orleans marched. And that was I photographed a lot of protests in my day. That was a big one. And seeing all of those beautiful women, young and old, black and white. I saw Jewish women next to Muslim women. I said, this is the most beautiful thing I've seen in New Orleans. And I started thinking, there's never been a book about New Orleans women. And I started, Googling. I went to Google notable New Orleanians. And the list was 85, 90% men. There was Ellen DeGeneres was on the list, Leah Chase, Irma Thomas. And then I started looking through my archives. That's when I started gathering the photos that I had and realized, oh, wow, I don't have as many photos of women as I thought I did. So I just kind of started going out and photographing all the women I could and putting it together. And it just kept getting bigger and bigger. Originally, I was going to do like 50 women and profile them.
Right.
But then, you know, consulting with my mentor, Bonnie Warren, and Kathy Finn, one of my editors, the list just kept growing. And I was like, well, so maybe I'll do like groups of women. Then I started doing the groups of women, like the Mardi Gras Indian queens, the baby dolls, those sort of things, and realized I couldn't write about all those things. So fortunately, I got a couple of grants from Threadhead, who was very generous, and the LEH, and they helped me hire 12 women to write 12 beautiful essays, which really made the book way more substantial than just a photography book. So.
Well, it is absolutely a beautiful book. And I mean, working in the bookstore, I have not seen another book, as you mentioned, that has, you know, showcases so many New Orleans women. And of course, here we are. So it's not like there isn't like 50% of us here in the city. And we have statues to women. We have streets named after women. We have all of this. So it's not like it's completely buried, and we acknowledge that a lot, but to really like put them in the forefront and make a whole book about it.
Yeah, and obviously, I mean, I do feel like since Hurricane Katrina, women have really like stepped up in activism roles, and we've definitely seen the renaissance of the baby dolls and the all-female marching crews and business women and, you know, female chefs who have opened their own restaurants, which 20 years ago, there were only a few. So it, you know, I've really noticed the upswing in women leaders in the community.
It's amazing to think you just said like 20 years ago, and you're right. You're absolutely right. But that's not that long ago.
I know.
Oh my gosh.
I know. Crazy.
So how did you get like started in photography? Because I mean, I have my phone. I take tons of photos. I have a 13-year-old son, so I sneak lots of photos of him now.
Yeah.
Because he hates having his picture taken. So everyone takes photos, especially in the digital age. But like, how did you find your passion in photography?
It took a long time. I was not one of those kids who grew up knowing what they wanted to be. Like, my husband knew he wanted to be a musician since he was 6 years old. I didn't know. I thought I was going to be like, I don't know, Dolly Parton or something, you know, like a country music singer. And, you know, by the time I got to college, I studied general studies. And I thought, okay, well, something will come to me. And my third semester in college, my guidance counselor, who happened to be a journalism teacher, he said, you know, you've been in general studies for 3 semesters. You kind of have to pick something. And I said, I don't know. We went through a list. Like, I don't want to work with kids. I don't want to work with sick people. I don't know. And I'm like, traveling would be good. Interesting people would be good. And he goes, well, what about journalism? And I said, well, I didn't see that in the catalog. And he said, well, we don't have it as a major. You can major in liberal arts and then take journalism classes. So I went from general studies to liberal arts. Big jump, you know?
Hey.
And I love journalism. And after working on a couple of small town newspapers, I realized that I'm still sitting at my desk. I'm still typing out stories. I'm not going out there. So when I was 20, I got my first camera as a gift, you know, my first real camera, and just started taking pictures to go with the stories. And every week, the pictures got bigger and the stories got smaller. I was a terrible writer. And my editors would like cover everything in red ink, and it really was intimidating. And so I was like, well, let's just do photographs. So that's how I kind of got started in it. But it took a long time to actually become a full-time working photographer. I was probably about 30 years old by the time I got where I was doing it all along, but where I could quit waiting tables and just, you know, be a photographer, jump off that ledge.
I think, you know, that's a thing that you take for granted as a young person, where, you know, everybody tells you, oh, what are you going to be? Oh, well, I'm going to be a photographer. right. First of all, that you even know. And second of all, that like you just walk out into the world and now you're the thing you said you were going to be.
Right, right.
That's, I mean, 99% of people I've talked to, that is not the way it is. Most of us don't fully know what we want to be. And even if we did, you don't get there by just walking up and saying, well, I'm a photographer. Like that's
no, in fact, I tried to do that. I am a photographer. And people would just kind of laugh at me. But, you know, and I had so much to learn about photography. Now, this was back way before the digital days. So I had a lot to learn about exposure and, you know, all of that. And I didn't know what kind of photography I wanted to do. And one day I was walking through the French Quarter, taking photos of, you know, St. Louis Cathedral, you know, the iconic shots that everybody takes. And I went to a gallery for fine photography and saw a show by Michael P. Smith. And I was
I'm going to interrupt you for just a second.
Sure.
Asher is my nephew, and he's never watched before. Hi, Asher.
Hi, Asher.
He's 7. Sorry. Yes, please. I love this story. I didn't want to miss him.
No. How old are you, Asher? How old is he?
He's 7.
Oh,
he
wow.
He just turned 7.
Well, I hope you enjoy watching us old ladies talk.
Right.
No, but I went into a gallery for fine photography, and they had all the master photographers that I knew of. But when I went to the back, there was a show by Michael P. Smith, a local person, and they were photos of all of the musical and African American culture of New Orleans that I had never seen before. My family was so part of that white flight from New Orleans to Metairie and then the North Shore. And so I didn't even know that side of New Orleans existed. And I just was blown away by it and was like, wow, I'd like to see some of that. And so I just went home and started calling Mike Smith, which in the phone book back in those days, there were dozens of them. I finally reached him and just told him how much I loved his photography, how it was so much of a surprise to me, and I'd love to work for him for free, offer my services, you know. And he kept saying, I just can't think of anything you can do for me. I just basically work on my own. And I don't know, I called him a half dozen times before he finally invited me over to kind of talk about what I wanted, what he might be able to use me for, and we couldn't think of anything. So I ended up in Honduras teaching English for a year. And while I was in Honduras, I got a postcard from Mike saying, when are you coming back? I thought of something you can do for me. And basically when I got back, I lived in his studio for a little while. We did photo shoots of Dr. John's CD covers and just amazing stuff. Really opened my eyes to the world of New Orleans that I didn't know. And did that for about a year until I decided it was time to jump off on my own. So it was fun.
That is such an amazing, I don't want to say just a New Orleans story, but that sort of, you run into the right person at the right time and you just keep hounding him. That's another thing people don't tell you. You want the job, you just keep asking for it.
Basically. Well, I will tell you from my experience as a freelancer, because it is hard to get freelance work, especially regular freelance work. And timing is everything too. You know, when I first approached Mike, it wasn't a right time. He couldn't think of anything I could do. Later, I would apply to Associated Press. I'd call the editor like 5 or 6 times before I called on the day that somebody quit. So, you know, there really is a lesson in being persistent. I mean, you don't want to be a jerk and be, you know, pushing yourself on people, but timing is everything. And so sometimes you might call and inquire about something and the timing is just wrong. And
yeah. And sometimes, you know, it is all about like, it's who you know, but it's not always like the bigger the person or the more prestigious the person. A lot of times, just if that person knows that person, and they could be sisters or friends or even kind of acquaintances, but just enough to say, hey, I know John, and
that helps out too.
Yeah.
And you know, like the first book I did, New Orleans, Life and Death in the Big Easy, I pitched that for a couple of years back in 2000, it was during the recession. What is that, 2009, 2010? And I just got nothing but rejection letters. And a couple of years later, a friend of mine, Matt Anderson, who's an amazing photographer, said, the recession's over. You might want to try that idea again. And so I started pitching it again, and the University Press of Louisiana, University of Louisiana Press, UL Press, they called me and got a book done in 6 months. It was great.
Yeah. Now I'm gonna say I'm gonna put a link in here, and if you follow it, it's gonna say out of print. That's a lie. Call out. I don't know why it says out of print on this link at the moment, and I can't troubleshoot it on the fly, but I do know we can get it. So
boy, I see you're in the spirit, the photography of Michael P. Smith. Every person in New Orleans should have that book. It's just so beautiful.
It is such a beautiful
book. A great homage to New Orleans culture.
And it was put out by the Historic New Orleans Collection.
Yeah.
So they just opened back up a couple weeks ago. Maybe they've been closed this whole time. The whole collection, the gift shop, everything was closed down.
And if anybody hasn't been to their new space, it's amazing. I think it's one of the most beautiful new places in New Orleans you can go. And there's a ton of photography there by Michael P. Smith. It's really funny. They even have lampshades with some of his photographs on them. And I was actually, the first time I walked by the store and I saw the lampshades with Michael P. Smith photographs, I thought, Mike must be turning over in his grave seeing that kind of stuff. And then I recently came across the postcards he sent me while I was in Honduras, and it was like, I figured out what you can do for me. Imagine my photos on posters and lampshades and pillows.
You did that.
And I was like, oh, okay. So he doesn't mind. Because, it's hard to make a living as a photographer, even for somebody of his stature. To photograph the culture of New Orleans is beautiful and wonderful and fun. But to make a living at it it's just not something you can do. So
it's like a lot of the arts. No matter what, if you're a band, you're a photographer, you're a sculptor, you're running a small business. And that small business, you don't just like buy some books and put them on a shelf and then people show up. You're constantly marketing and advertising and hustling, talking it up, bringing people in. And that's what you do if you're running a band, if you're a photographer. You don't just take pictures and then somebody buys them. That's great. Like, you have to get constant. And that's unfortunate.
And the other aspect for me personally is, photographing the culture in New Orleans of musicians, of Indians, of all of that. I don't want to profit from that. That's their art. I want to pay homage to it, and I want to show it to the world because I think it's truly beautiful. But I learned a long time ago that I could just stick to either newspaper work, which that died, and then I switched to events, and we all know that died. So now I'm trying to figure out what is going to be phase 3 here. I don't know.
So how good of a photo can you get of our Zoom meeting? Because I can't get a good photo of these. There you go. There's some event photography for you. This is what events are now.
Let's see. So I'll take a picture here. The iPhone takes even better pictures sometimes than my camera. But, Peter Raschuti from Tulane, the business professor, he had me on his show Out for Lunch, and he does this bit where he says, your brother-in-law comes to you with this great idea, and do you take it or not? And the idea is you're going to just take pictures over the internet. I mean, why? You could do headshots of people, from over the computer. You don't have to go there. And at the time, this was pre-COVID, I said, that's a stupid idea. Nobody's going to do that. But now I'm thinking, maybe I could do a little Photoshop and touch people's headshots up. Everybody needs a headshot now.
It's true. It's true. That would be interesting, though. I would be interested to see how you would actually do that. It would be such a different experience than like being in the room with a photographer.
You'd have to be a director for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. But I have some friends who are actors, and they're doing a lot of their auditions. They were doing some of their auditions before, but they're doing all of their auditions now. They do it themselves. They
Wow.
take they set up their phone or their little camera, and they have their own light, and they just do the audition on their own, and they have very little input or direction or assistance or anything. And I'm like, it would bother me. Like, I would think that, well, they're looking at my performance, but they're also like looking at everything. And what is this in the background? Does that mean that I don't get the part in the thing or whatever? Right. I was like, oh, that sounds very stressful to me. But
hi, Joy. I just saw Joy signed in.
Hello.
So, yeah, I mean, I know for a long time people have been doing job interviews on the internet. So I guess this is where we are now.
I did this job interview on the phone.
Oh,
so yeah, I wasn't in New Orleans at the time when I got this job. And Britton called me and we talked for maybe 10 minutes, and he's like, well, when are you going to be back in town? And I told him, and then he was like, well, I don't know, can you start that Tuesday? And I was like, I guess so. Thank you. That means I got the job? Like most of the time they're like, oh, well, that was very nice to talk to you. I'll get right back with you. Now Britton was like, what are you doing on Tuesday? I guess I'm going to work at the bookstore.
Well, good for you, because I've done interviews online and on the phone and didn't get the job.
Well,
so I don't know what that says about me.
Don't get me wrong. I have done those too. Just this one happened to work out in my favor. So
that's cool.
There you go. And I'll say, anybody else who's watching, if you have any questions or comments or just want to say hi, please post those in the comments. We can read those and we will answer your questions.
Linda, hi Linda. My favorite camera. It's funny. my first camera was Canon. I had a Canon AE1. But after I broke up with the boyfriend who gave it to me, I left it behind and ended up with Nikon. And fortunately for me, Associated Press, I was working for them stringing for them for a few years. And when they switched from Nikon to Canon, they sold me a bunch of their old Nikon equipment. And once you buy those big lenses, the ones that cost like $10,000, it's hard to switch. Right now, I use the Nikon D750, and I love it. I don't even think they make it anymore. I've upgraded since then a couple of times and brought the cameras back because I love the D70 so much. The colors, the Wi-Fi, the ease of use is just, I just love it. I don't know if I'm going to buy another camera after that. And as far as black and white, I have not done black and white in, I guess, probably since digital, 20 years. But this week, I just printed my first prints in the darkroom in 25 years. And I got to tell you, it's been so much fun going through old black and white negatives and printing them. So you really can't beat black and white for art anyway.
Yeah. So you just like, what do you call it? Not produced when you make a picture.
Develop, well, print it, develop it. Yeah, it was funny. Like, I just got nostalgic for the darkroom. Now we have all this time on our hands. We're like, I'm going through old negatives, and you can scan them into the computer, but the senses, the memory, I don't know, what do you call it? Sensory memories of being in the darkroom were really strong. And I put a note out on Facebook if anybody had any darkroom, because I got rid of my darkroom stuff so long ago, and I put out a plea. Anybody have any darkroom equipment that they want to sell? And this wonderful photographer / doctor in Metairie gave me a darkroom, and I love him. Thank you. And it's great because now my grandkids are coming over Sunday, and we just developed our first pinhole. Let me see if I can find it. I did a pinhole camera print that I'm going to show them how to use. And it was, oh my gosh, it was like magic printing that first pinhole camera. I don't have the actual print here because it's probably in my office, but I did take a picture of it. If I can find it. Oh, here it is. It's, let's see if you can see it. Well, let's see. Where am I? It's my outdoor bathtub. That was a 14-minute exposure. And, you know, of course, it's in negative because you're printing it on paper. But we just ordered some positive paper so that we can do them in positive. It's going to be fun.
Okay, so what does that mean now?
So when you do a pinhole camera, you put a piece of developing like printable paper, photography paper, in the dark light proof box, or in our case, we did a big can, and you punch a little pinhole in it, and when the light comes through, it makes the photograph. You take the paper and you go develop it, but it comes out as a negative because the paper, when you do negative to paper, it becomes a positive. Right. But since you don't have the film, you're just doing the positive, which comes out to be a negative. I don't know. Anyway.
Wow.
So I didn't even know. We were trying to figure out how we could do the film, but then it was going to be like kind of aggravating to have to develop the film and then the print for a pinhole camera. The kids would get bored. So we found out that there is paper that will be positive instead of negative.
That's awesome. And how old are your grandkids?
They are 7 and almost 9. Well,
yeah,
6 and 8, 6 and 8, almost 7 and 9.
Well, you see, you got to get that right because it's a little.
Which is really, I know, and it's, you know, I brought them in while I was building the darkroom, and they were kind of like not really getting it. But when they come over tomorrow or Sunday, I think it's going to blow their minds because especially their mother was 9 when she first went into the darkroom with me, and it was like magic.
Yeah,
so.
See it. Like all this talking about it in the concept. Yeah, that sounds great, Grandma. All right, cool. But when it actually starts happening, that's that's in the magic.
And it's just cool being in the dark, like a scientist, you know, like
what? Yeah, and you're in there with them, so it's like not. It's fun because it almost feels like you're doing something you're not supposed to be doing.
Right.
But like it's totally fine. But that's the thing. If they walk in and turn a light off, you're like, what are you doing? Turn the light back on. Why are you doing that?
I know.
And now this is like a sanctioned.
And it's funny that I'm attracted to it now because I got to tell you, back in the day when I was up all night printing on deadline, I was just like, please, God, can somebody create something so I don't have to be all night in the dark room?
Well, that's the difference between having to do it and choosing to do it.
Exactly.
That is like, I love reading. I am in the middle of 2, 3, 4 books sometimes, all the time. But the minute you tell me I have to read this, I'm like, oh God, why?
I know.
Well, and it could have been a book I wanted to read. It could have been on my list. And then as soon as book club picks it, and I love my book club, but as soon as they pick it, I go, oh, now I have to. Now I move to this different part of the pile, and I will, and I'll finish it. I'll get there.
Well, speaking of books and photographers, I don't know if you guys have read Ted Jackson, who worked for the Times-Picayune. He's a Pulitzer Prize-winning photographer. He just did a really amazing book. I'm going to grab it real quick.
Yeah.
I want to plug him.
Absolutely. I'm going to look it up on the website here so we can maybe.
Is it? Yeah. You ought to do a story about me. And 30 years ago, Ted was doing a story for the Times-Picayune on a homeless encampment over under the Carrollton overpass, and photographed this man sleeping almost, just in his like shorts under a plastic. And when he woke him up to get his name and started talking to him, and the guy said, "You ought to do a story on me." And Ted's like, "Yeah, why?" And he says, because I've been in 3 Super Bowls. And lo and behold, Jackie Wallace was a St. Aug hit, outstanding star who ended up playing in 3 Super Bowls. And Ted and him stayed friends for 30 years through, of course, he had some addiction problems, and it's just a really beautiful book about what happens when you rise that fast to stardom. And then the NFL just kind of lets you go, and you're still a young man, and things happen, and you get through your addiction. But they've been friends for all that time, and it's a really beautiful story in so many ways. And it's got the photographs in there that he took of Jackie Wallace through all the years. So just plugging my friend.
I put the link in the comments so everybody can go and look at the book. I do remember when that came out, and I haven't read it, but it is a fascinating story. And it did make me think about, like you're saying, the NFL just lets you go. And it's not just the NFL, it's any of these things that you get into like right out of school. By the time, and we were talking about like by the time that we were just trying to figure out, this is what I'm going to do with my life, they've already had a career and they're at home going, what do I do now?
What do you do now? And
a lot of them, you're right, they've been stuck in this sort of lifestyle, is hurry up and go, and this big money, and it's similar to like, I don't know, being a child celebrity and
actor,
like that, right? And nobody thinks about it. You pay attention to them when they're playing the game, if they're on your team. I mean, I don't know people that play on other teams that aren't the Saints. You're paying attention to them for these few years, and then they go off, and that's it. They're off the radar for the most part.
Very true.
So that's fascinating.
Yeah, and when he was playing, of course, back in those days, you were pretty finished up by the time you were 27, 28 years old. Not like Drew Brees at 41 years old, still, he and Tom Brady still hurling passes.
That's still a really rare thing, though. I mean, most NFL players are out of the game, in their early mid-30s for sure. Getting, him being 41, that is an anomaly, I think.
It is an anomaly.
But
the other thing that I think is so great about that story, and it has to do with photography, is, and I'm only learning this now as an older woman, when you're young and you're taking photographs, you have no idea what the relevance of those photos are going to be 30 years out.
Right.
Like, for instance, when I was photographing Trombone Shorty when he was 4 or 5 years old, I had no idea he was going to be Trombone Shorty. I just...
An adorable kid with this huge instrument.
Right.
Like, that's a good picture.
Right. And I, going through, taking this time during COVID and going through my archives, which, there was never a time until COVID that I could go through those archives. And now I'm going through them. I recently went and looked up like the first second line that I did. Because I really love photographing second lines. And it was the first one I did with Michael Smith. I think it was either 90 or 91. And I was looking at one of the negatives, and I never printed these photos. I just took them, developed the film, and put them in a file cabinet. And I'm looking through them, and I see this photo, and I know of a woman second lining with the men and the band behind her, and I know her even 30 years later. And she's in the Cherchez La Femme book. She's one of the, and if I can find, I'll try to look it up, but she and I have become friends because of the book. And in fact, when she came, she lives in Baton Rouge now since Hurricane Katrina, but she still comes in and does her second lines every year with the Lady Jet Setters. Mm-hmm. And she came to the art opening in January for the book, and came to the after party at Molly's and bought us all drinks because she's such a lovely person. But I texted her the photo, and I was like, oh my God, is this you 30 years ago? And she's like, oh my God, that's me. And it's really surreal to find photos of people you crossed paths with so long ago, and now you're friends. And that happens, it happens a lot now. I photograph just about everybody in this town, but
because you're taking these photographs at all these events and wherever you go, you have this like documentation of it. You know, those things are happening to probably all of us. Like, we could have been at that second line, never would have known she was there, and then known her time later. But you have this photo. You know?
Exactly. I'm trying to find it, but I don't know. Who knows when I posted it? I post so many things, but it's back there. But it was just, oh, here it is. Let me just show you guys if I can pull it up. Okay, I don't know if you can see that. Whoop.
Oh,
there is Creola Jackie Moon in 1990, and there she is, like almost 30 years later at the bottom. I asked her, I said, so what color, I mean, it's in black and white, so I'm like, what color were you wearing? And she said, royal blue and kiwi. She remembered it like it was yesterday. So I love that.
I don't remember what I wore last week. I mean, it's in my closet, but I don't know. And too, like, even with costumes, unless it's like a very specific thing for a specific event, I won't remember that in a year or 2 years.
Well, you know, one costume I remember from Mardi Gras, this past Mardi Gras, February 25th. I wasn't paying much attention to a lot of the costumes, but there was one in particular, and it was a group of people. I love group costumes. They're so creative. And it was a bunch of people dressed up like Corona beer bottles. And two green guys with signs. Would you like a little Lyme disease with that? And I thought that was hilarious because we had just heard that China was having the coronavirus, but it was a joke. It was like, and little did we know that Mardi Gras, we were just spreading that virus all over the place.
Yeah. And sometimes it's those things that are so simple, but you get all your friends to do it. Yeah, I mean, and now it's great. It's this great.
It's history, you know.
I think my favorite costume really from Mardi Gras this year, and it might be because I know a lot of the work that went into it. My friend Laura Cayuette, her husband, Andy, he created the whole Hard Rock Hotel, like and he built it with styrofoam, and he had all these, and so he was on him, and he had the crane hanging off the side of it and everything, and I was like, wow. I mean, that was really impressive.
I would have said too soon.
I was
like, well, it wasn't that soon. It was 4 months later.
Yeah.
But still.
It shouldn't have still been too soon. It was a little bit, but only because we didn't really fix the whole, well, not even fixed. It's not fixed yet. It's still there.
Well, I will forever remember that day because it happened to be my birthday, and my husband and I were headed to go buy some birthday cakey stuff for everybody. And we got on the interstate. You know, we live in the Marigny, so we're going up on the interstate, and I see it. It was like 9 a.m. or 9:30. It was really early, and it was collapsed. And I went, oh my God, do you see that? And we looked at it. I said, turn around. So we got off at the next exit, and we went back. It hadn't even been made the news yet.
Right.
And when we got there, I grabbed my camera out of the car, and we just started photographing the workers. Yeah. Didn't know what was, I mean, they were all just still running out. It was unbelievable. And I remembered thinking while we were on the interstate, I said, thank God it's Saturday because nobody must be working. And they were.
I thought that same thing. I mean, there were some people working, but because it was Saturday and early in the morning like that there weren't nearly as many people out and about as would have been.
Yeah, it was surreal. So that, you know, my birthday's coming up, and I think about where I was on that day. Yeah, it's, you know, what am I going to do for yet another birthday? I remember I turned 40 during Katrina.
Oh,
and nobody was in town. There was I remember going to Molly's, and I remember Elliot Kamenetz, a photographer from the New York Times, from the Times-Picayune was there, and a few other journalists, and we were kind of all depressed. And I didn't tell anybody it was my birthday because it was kind of like, woohoo!
Right, you're all going through this thing. Everybody's like sad and everything's a mess, and you don't want to be like, hey, that little bit of attention you've got right here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I had my 40th birthday party the next year a Chihuahua.
Oh, see, that's okay. You made up for it.
I was like, so I'm celebrating my milestone 41.
Hey, that works. That's
Fun.
that's I think what my 40th birthday is this year in December.
Oh my God, you look so young.
Oh,
I know not to say it, at least on internet.
Yes.
I don't know.
Working. But yeah, and I'm like from the time you turn 39, everybody's like, oh, what are you gonna do for next year? What are you gonna do for your 40th? What's, you know, and I didn't have any plans necessarily, but there is this anticipatory thing. It's coming up, and like you got to do something. And now it's just like, what am I gonna do? I mean, you're not gonna do much of anything. And I think it's gonna be similar to your 40th in that my 41st birthday gonna be great.
Well, I got to tell you this one story surrounding my 40th birthday, because it was very odd to be in New Orleans post Katrina and turning 40, and my, you know, just everybody was just depressed. Well, during this COVID thing, my brother passed away earlier in April. And I think it was corona, but we don't know because he wasn't tested. He had cancer, but it was like this, it was, I'll talk about that another time. But anyway, we were going through his home after Katrina, and we found all these VHS tapes that my mother used to make. And I brought them home, opened them up, and they still smelled like her cigarettes, which was weird. And she's been gone since 2014. And I had to buy a $20 VHS off of Craigslist so I could watch them. And I popped in one tape that said, "Happy birthday, Cheryl." And it was from my mother. Happy birthday on my 40th birthday that I'd never seen before. And it was the most amazing gift anybody could ever give you. She was just talking to me about life, and she had just lost her husband, my father, the year before, and she talked about that. And it was, and she started crying, and it got emotional, and it freaked me out. And she was like, I don't want to get emotional. And she disappears. She goes out of the room, and she comes back all dressed up with flowers in her hair and a baton, and starts dancing the happy birthday dance for me. And I'd never seen it. It was so weird and beautiful and strange just to, you know, experience that.
Those little things, they're so perfect. And like,
it made me realize the importance of documenting things. You know, now people have iPhones and they have cameras that they can do videos of their kids, but you know, I mean, my mother, she didn't have all of that. She bought a 8mm camera at a garage sale one day and started taking pictures of us, and I'm so grateful she did that. And you know, then she got the VHS camera and did, I mean, oh my gosh, she's done amazing work. But it makes you realize the importance of documenting things, you know, how much it matters to people.
Absolutely. I mean, my mom, she has albums and albums and albums of photographs. And we had one of those big VHS things you'd be up on your shoulder. Yeah. So one of the coolest things that my mom's done that, you know, in this way for us is for me and my sister, she took all of those VHS tapes that she had and she had them put onto DVDs.
Yeah.
And something that I need to do, because I have now I have like 14 DVDs sitting in my drawer. And what I really need to do is dump those into a computer and put them on a hard drive too, so that now I've got this backup.
Yeah, I did that. I literally had the room that I'm in now, I had the entire floor with all of my mother's VHS tapes, my VCR I bought for $20, and my husband got me an adapter to make it go digital onto the computer. It took forever because you have to do it in real time. You can't like just fast forward it. But it was okay because I was seeing things I'd never seen before. And after 2 weeks, I had a digital library of everything. And my mother, who was very embarrassing when I was a kid, I did not appreciate her eccentricities. I do now as an older person looking at her doing this. Anyway, I posted a couple of her videos on YouTube and then Facebook. And recently, the Louisiana Film Commission contacted me to see if I could upload them. They were so intrigued by them. If I could upload them to their streaming service. So I'm in the process of kind of trying to figure out all of that, you know.
That is fascinating. So she gets to become this piece of Louisiana history.
That she didn't even have any idea. And the funny thing is that when I was young, I did not appreciate her. She was the most embarrassing person I had ever known. And, you know, now as an older person, I really appreciate it. It's bizarre.
So I have a question though. So how did your children feel about you?
Well, actually, my grandchildren are step-grandchildren.
Okay.
I did not want to have kids because of my mother.
Oh, no. I mean, that's a fine decision, but no.
But I will tell you, I declared to everybody in my family when I was 13 years old that I was never having kids because I did not like what I was seeing. And I ended up having 2 amazing stepkids, and I ended up raising my nephew from the time he was 3 till he just turned 18. So I really got to be a mother, and you know, it's really fun. It's ironic. I always tell people it's ironic that I never wanted my own kids, but I've been cursed out by 4 teenagers. So there you go. The grandkids are a whole nother story. They are so beautiful and loving that they're not angry yet.
Yeah. They're getting there. Like I said, my son turned 13. Well, he'll be 14 this December. And the teenager label is real.
Oh, wow.
It's not something that people have made up. And here's the thing. See, I was never embarrassed by my mom. And my mom, she would do silly things. I come from this entertainment family. So my mom was a dancer, and my mom, you know, she's a little eccentric. She'd sing, she'd dance, we'd have a great time. Never embarrassed. I would take my mom's hand in the mall. I'd be like, let him look at me. I don't care. My son, oh my God. If I don't even know. I'm just sitting here and he's like, God, Mom. And I'm like, what?
Oh, it's so funny because like with my nephew, you know, I'm bringing him to his school every morning. And I would wave to the kids, and it's like, stop! Or if I dance during the music, stop! Oh. So I had to drive literally like this, straight ahead. Don't, it's like, you know, go immediately to jail. Just keep going and don't stop. Oh my gosh, it was hard. And I used to tell him, I said, you think that's embarrassing? Let me tell you about the time your mama drove across the football field. I mean, there, you know, so it's relative.
Yeah.
It's relative.
Yeah. Back when dropping my son off to school, we worked into this, like I would sort of pat his knee, you know, no hugs, no kisses, no, none of that for like the last year or so, you know, of when we were in school. But I would work over this like sort of knee pat that would under the dash where no one could see that. So it was okay. Right. If I just go, all right, have a good day at school. And then he would get out like he doesn't care, you know.
They're much more independent than, you know, I was anyway. I see that Hope said, what an amazing post from your mom. If you want to look up my mom's things, that my mother only went to the 7th grade. She grew up in the Irish Channel. She had a lot of trauma in her youth, so she ends up meeting my dad. They get married, and if you want to see the posts, I think they are amazing. I put them on YouTube. I guess if you look up Cheryl Gerber on YouTube, you might see a couple of them. I didn't know when I was growing up how brilliant she was. She didn't have an education, and that was her greatest regret. But I was the first person to go to college in my extended family. And when I came home on the weekends and talked about Shakespeare, it really inspired her. And she started writing, and she started filming, and she started doing poetry readings. And she became like kind of a local person on the North Shore. She used to do these poetry readings at the Ruby Roadhouse. And I wasn't there for much of it, but seeing it on these VHS tapes for the first time has been mind-blowing. And now I used to hide her from my friends and family because I thought she was embarrassing, and now I just want to share her with the world. So if you want to go to YouTube, look it up. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah, and I just put a link to Cheryl's YouTube, so you can go through there and find.
God, you're good. You're on it.
I was doing this since April. Back in April, it was a mess. It's like everything's coming in. I can't say anything. I was missing stuff all the time. But after like however many months this has been, here we go.
Yeah. Well, it's funny, I tried so hard to design my life to be different than my mother's, and it's turned out to be exactly like hers. I've embarrassed my nephew to no end. I document, and she documented the world around her. She wasn't a photographer, but she documented everything around her, and I'm so grateful for that.
Yeah, and that is funny how that happens. Where there were so many things that I wanted to do that my mom did, and then of course so many things that you don't want to do. So you want to be very different then. And then when you get there, that's still what to fall back on. So you're doing this thing in life, and you're like, okay, well that's what you've seen. So I start doing it and go, oh, this is exactly what my mom did. I love my mom to death, but sometimes it's like, oh, all right, but I'm here now doing it.
I remember when one of my younger sisters called me one day, I don't know, this was years ago, and she goes, oh my God, I just yelled at my daughter and I sounded just like Andre. Have you done that? I was like, I mean, we all do that. We become our parents eventually,
Yeah,
in some way or another.
You can't write. Yeah, you're like, look, I did my first reel because I said so recently. And I worked so hard, to always explain and always, there's all this reasoning and all of this stuff. And then again, you hit teenager and it doesn't matter because it's really, what I know about the world and what I know is we're going to call it the right way because you're going to hurt yourself or that's going to turn out poorly, just don't do that versus I want to.
Right.
I got nothing for that. I can't with that. So yeah, I was like probably about 6 months ago or so. I pulled my first true, I was not going to explain this. I was like, look, I just said do it. And I was like,
oh, I tell you, motherhood, I never thought I was suited for it for a good reason. But, having a young child all of a sudden after Katrina, I read every book. I did every single thing you can do. And the time flies by so fast.
Yeah.
You never have time to get it all right. You just don't.
Yeah.
You just do the best you can and hope for the best. And even if it doesn't seem like you did a good job, eventually little things come in and you go, oh, okay, that worked.
All right. Yeah, I always knew that I wanted at least one child, which I got one. And I never wanted to be a school teacher. I don't want to deal with anyone else's children. I'm fine. There are 2 children on the planet that I really get along with and care a lot about. That's my son and my nephew. I'm good. I'm okay with that. I've come to terms. I can keep your child alive for a short period of time if you need me to watch them, but I don't want to watch them if there's someone else that can do it for you. Let's be clear up front about that. And then we'll be fine. It's going to be forever.
Yeah. Nobody tells you everything involved.
No, not at all.
I got my nephew literally the Thanksgiving after Katrina. It was like just trying to negotiate post-Katrina New Orleans and then suddenly have a toddler. And it was only that the stepkids had moved with their mother after Katrina. So my husband was like, we're done for the first time since he was 21 years old. He was done. And then I get a call like, oh, you need to take your nephew. And I'm like, okay.
Sure.
I mean, I would bring them on photo shoots with me to, like, for Katrina things, hoping that, like, I'd let him sleep in the back seat and go, okay, well, I'm going to go run through the ninth ward. He won't notice anything. And then he'd wake up and be like, whoopsie daisy.
Yeah.
There'd be a car under a house. And my favorite was I had to go photograph a demolition of a building, and I was just like, oh my God, this is gonna scar him for life. And I had no choice. There were no babysitters and daycares after Katrina. Right. And I take him to this big demolition, and the ball goes through the building, and he's jumping up and down like a maniac. Do it again.
Oh, I was about to say, I was like, he's gonna love that.
He loved it.
He's gonna love it. Yes.
So there's always something to,
I know
entertain a child
who love like construction vehicles so much that their parents have taken them to construction sites and hung out outside the chain link fence and like had because their kids would just watch the cranes and the stuff. And I'm like, all right. And my son would not do that. He was not. He didn't care about that. Well, I was like, that's cheap entertainment. I can afford lunch and some goldfish crackers, some juice, and a construction site.
You really just don't know. But anyway.
I wanted to say that we're getting close to time. So if anybody has any last questions or comments, you can type it in there, and we'll get to those.
Wow, I'm through my triple whiskey.
I know. Exactly. I will say one thing that I think happens with digital photography, especially, and maybe traditional photography as well. But I take 1 billion pictures, but I lose them. The digital filing system is difficult, and like I said, my mom has these albums and albums and albums of photographs. Like I know where to go in her house to get them and look at them at any time. And maybe those are harder to reproduce if I wanted to make copies for my sister or my son or something, but I know where they are. Like right now, if I wanted to go back and find pictures of his 2nd birthday, I got to dig through the masses of digital photography. And I there's got to be a better way. I need to find a better way to organize them, I think.
Well, if you can get like any kind of photography app or something on your computer where you could put in metadata, because now you can embed your photographs, and I know it's a pain in the butt, and I've only just started doing it in the last few years, because honestly, when I'm going back through my negatives, Michael Smith taught me a filing system, which I thought was genius. On index cards, kind of like the Dewey Decimal System. And I did it. Yeah. But I'm going through these things 30 years later and realizing I didn't cross-section. I photographed people by their names, but didn't put Mardi Gras Indian.
Oh.
And I don't remember their names. And I'm like, oh, Yeah. So you can go, if you can get, and there's so many cheap apps you can get. Photoshop's expensive, but there are other ones I don't know them because I use Photoshop, but you can embed keywords into them. And so when you look for those keywords, they just pop up, which is important these days. It's horrible looking for things now. And I'm realizing, wow, I did not cross-section.
Yeah, and you don't think, because when you're making, you think, well, I'm always going to be working in this with these, so it's always going to be fresh and using it, but it does. I mean, time.
You don't know what you don't know. You just
exactly. Oh my gosh. Well, Cheryl, it has been great talking with you.
Oh, how fun.
Thank you very much for joining me for Virtual Happy Hour. And everybody, you can get Cheryl's books at Garden District Bookshop. I put the link earlier. I'll put the link again here at the end for all of her books. Her most recent is Cherchez La Femme.
Oh my God, it's like, I'm not just saying this, but it is the best Christmas gift ever. If you love women and love New Orleans, and it's historic, the essays round out the historical aspects of women in New Orleans where I couldn't photograph them. And it's just really, University Press of Mississippi did an amazing job.
Absolutely. It is a beautiful book. And yes, and I encourage everyone to do their Christmas shopping a little early this year because there are shipping issues on both ends, getting the books in and then shipping the books out to you. It is taking longer in both directions. Cheryl's book is going to be really easy for us to get because it's so close, the publisher, but getting it out to you if we needed to ship it, that needs some extra time. So I definitely encourage everyone plan a few weeks earlier for Christmas this year and Hanukkah because it's going to take a little bit extra time. They're saying that October is the new December this year. That is
I love that.
literally part of our American Bookseller Association marketing this year because just straight taking more time to get everything and to get everything out to people. So
yeah,
let's do that. So. Thank you. Oh.
Thank you, Raina, and just thank you, everybody, and buy the book.
Yeah. All right, everyone, have a good evening.
All right, bye-bye.